welcome to WIN TV, Lieutenant Rutherford. Thanks for correcting me. I appreciate that. And now that you've corrected me, educate me. I know that it's you. I know that it was Lieutenant Governor, why am I having brain freeze?
Anthony Brown and Michael Steele. Michael Steele was the first, and then Anthony Brown, now Congressman Brown, and then myself.
Well, I'm glad that you're keeping the seat warm.
There's only been nine lieutenant governors in the state history.
Yeah, that's well, you know, I think that we are representing well, and I'm just so excited. I'm glad that Will is here. I just want to say my 2 cents first. You know, we've been wanting to get you on the show since you were a candidate for office.
Oh, and really?
Yeah, we want folks to know, you know, who you are and you know, all the work that you've been doing out there and I say out there because I'm in the district, but in Prince George's County, in the state of Maryland. But particularly since our readers are in Prince George's County, and William covers the county, I know you know him well. So
right, I've seen William from time to time, and you, I guess you didn't know that I'm a native Washingtonian.
Oh,
and my mother was. Now, you're related to Calvin Rolark?
I am his daughter. I am.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
so
right.
Yeah.
Yes, so it sounds like we have a family conversation going on here. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have you back again. I'm going to turn it over to Will now, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Then Governor Rutherford, how are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. Let's have a nice little chat, shall we, before you go. Wanted to let viewers know about your work you've been doing with the Maryland State, the Equity Task Force.
Oh, yeah.
And with the coronavirus, the details as of today, the positivity rate is below 1%. I think I saw the health department report 71.5% of those received at least one dose of vaccine. And I think the CDC is ranking Maryland among the top states in the nation for its vaccination efforts, excuse me. So from when you've done your travel, sir, what did you learn from seeing nonprofit organizations and churches stepping up to help residents get vaccinated?
Yeah, one of the things that we did, well, thank you, and that's a great question. One of the things we did early on, because there was a lot of concern, and still concern, that particularly people in the African-American and the Latino communities might be resistant to getting vaccines. And particularly since, you know, the African-American community was hit pretty hard with regard to infections as well as fatalities, wanted to make sure we got to the people who were most vulnerable early. And so we reached out to the churches in particular, nonprofits also, but mainly the churches because, you know, they are trusted voices. They're places where people, you know, feel comfortable and feel safe and have a long history of, you know, direct involvement. And, you know, many of the churches, particularly in the African-American community, they have an older congregation. And so, you know, the first priority for people, you know, to get vaccinated, you know, after the nursing homes, because that's where we saw a lot of fatalities, were older Marylanders. And so we reached out to the churches who were very welcoming in terms of, you know, allowing us to come in and work with them to get vaccines to not just their congregations, but the communities around. And so it was very successful. It has been, and it will continue to do some of that. We're shifting now, and we can talk a little bit further about how, you know, things have changed now that we have, as you said, about 71% of adults have gotten at least one vaccine, and I think we're at 57% total population that's fully vaccinated. And I want to say it's 87%, 89% of those 65 and above have received at least one vaccine. But there's still pockets that we haven't reached. And so we're shifting our strategy to reach these pockets.
Is there a little, I don't know if you can give a full strategy, but what's maybe summarize what's a little bit of strategy to reach those individuals, and also advice for some who still are a little leery about being vaccinated?
Yeah. You know, first, the advice on those who are leery is that there really isn't any need to be leery of receiving the vaccine. The vaccines work. They have been tested. They're still being monitored. People first started receiving vaccines in the trials back in August of last year, and they're still being monitored in terms of the effect. We saw early on the impact of the vaccines because the first priority group, people may remember back in December and January when we were first getting vaccines in the state, it was a very limited supply that we were receiving, and that was nationwide. But the priority was nursing homes and frontline healthcare workers. And we picked nursing homes because half of our fatalities at that point were nursing home related. Because these people were already very fragile, and this virus attacks the weaknesses in your system. And so we saw when those individuals were getting vaccinated, we saw the fatality rate at nursing homes just drop through the floor. We saw infections with frontline healthcare workers who got vaccinated go down substantially, that they were not getting infected at the rates that they were previously. And the ones who were vaccinated were not getting, weren't getting sick. And we're seeing numbers now that, with the fact that we have, over 50%, close to 60% of Marylanders fully vaccinated, and it's a higher number than that if you go with just adults, we're seeing our numbers go down substantially. As you mentioned, the positivity rate is below 1%. The cases per capita or cases per 100,000 are down to an extremely low level. And when we say the positivity rate, being below 1%, if you remember back almost a year ago, the World Health Organization said if it was at 5%, you could open your economy, and we're now below 1%. So, the vaccines have made a significant difference. And so in terms of shifting the strategy, early on, once we started getting more and more vaccines, we wanted to get them into as many arms as possible, as quickly as possible. And that's where we had the mass vaccine sites. The first one was at FedEx Field, or not FedEx Field, Six Flags, excuse me. Six Flags was the first one, to try to do 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000 people a day, 5,000 people a day if we could. We opened up at M&T Stadium where Ravens play in Baltimore and the Baltimore Convention Center, and then other places around the state, mass vac sites. The amount of people going to those sites is going down substantially. It just is not as productive as it once was. All those who wanted to get the vaccines early on have gotten them and are getting them. And so we're now shifting. While we were always doing community sites, we're shifting a lot more focus on communities and using the data we have in terms of zip codes and census tracts where we see a low penetration of vaccines. And we're moving to doing more pop-up type of just, Saturday, we're going to be at such and such shopping center and, come get a shot. I will say that with about 700 pharmacies around the state providing vaccines, that's making a big difference too. But we have to reach those people, like you first mentioned, who are hesitant, and talking to them. And if we can get close to them, like with these pop-up sites, with going to some of these events that occur where people are going to for various reasons, maybe it's the barbecue festival, maybe it's a local brewery, and they haven't gotten a vaccine, we may be able to catch them at a time when they say, yeah, I was thinking about getting it, and so I'm going to move in that direction.
Thank you, sir. I want to make sure we respect your time. We've got about a few more minutes left. Father's Day is next week. And I see a lovely picture partly behind you, like a family portrait.
Yeah, from a couple of years ago on one of the election nights, yeah.
All right. And wanted to make sure, and also, what's the significance or meaning of Father's Day for you? And how do you celebrate?
Well, I'm probably not as, but Father's Day for me, and usually the thing that I ask for, for those of us who are married, the wife often will ask you, what do you want for dinner? And I'm pretty simple when that comes to it. I just my favorite meal is fried chicken. So that's what I ask for. And otherwise, I just want to be left alone. I know that sounds anti-family or something, but I just, just let me be me. Let me just sit and vegetate, read the paper, actually read a newspaper. Just let me be. Just let me be.
You sound like an everyday father. A lot of fathers would like to have just that quiet time.
Yeah, just the quiet time where there's, where I'm not necessarily doing something, even though you sit around for a while and then you see something that you need to do in the house and you just start doing it. But at least it's because I wanted to versus I had to. So.
Well, Lieutenant Governor Rutherford, I think, I wanted to just say, do you have a Rutherford fact that you do? I've seen on Twitter. You happen to have one today?
Let's see. Okay. Well, just off the top of my head, I mentioned being the, 9th lieutenant governor. There's only been 8 since 1978. There was one in the 1860s. Christopher Cox was from the American Union Party. And in 1864, of course, the Civil War was still going on. In the new Constitution, Maryland's Constitution of 1864, it created the lieutenant governor's position, which Chris Cox became lieutenant governor. He was a doctor. And it also was the same Constitution that abolished slavery in Maryland, which happened to be during the Civil War, toward the tail end, I should say, of the Civil War. And it was almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. As I continue to go on, it's not going to be a short story, but, a lot of, with the Juneteenth celebrations that come up, I often say to people, well, Juneteenth is great to recognize, but we should probably be celebrating more the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which eliminated slavery. Because the Emancipation Proclamation did not eliminate slavery. Only in the states that were in rebellion did it eliminate slavery. So states like Maryland and Delaware and Kentucky were still slave states throughout the Civil War. And so it wasn't until 1864, the new Constitution that created a lieutenant governor, but also abolished slavery in Maryland, is when Maryland actually got out of the slave business. And it wasn't until about a year and a half later, not quite a year and a half later, that the 13th Amendment was ratified that ended slavery in the entire Union. So that's a little bit of history or other fact that the Maryland State Constitution 1864 is very significant, I think, to Marylanders.
Thank you very much, sir. If anyone hasn't learned anything, they learned today. Thank you, sir. Have a very good weekend.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will. That was quite an interesting conversation. And I see that the Lieutenant Governor seems to be quite a historian. And it's good during this Juneteenth celebration. Every state has their own story. And I think it's important. My dad was a Texan, and he always talks about Juneteenth, and he died an angry man over what happened to the Black folks in Texas because of the 2-year delay in freeing them once the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. But we all have our stories. DC considered the first freed, and Philadelphia has a story, and Pennsylvania, Maryland has a story. So I'm glad he was here to share with us, and I think he'll be coming back. Is there anything you didn't get to ask him that you had wanted to put in there?
Well, yeah, there was one little thing I wanted to touch on about him and being a registered Republican and just his experiences about that. But hopefully we can get him on again and we can touch on that.
All right, good. And if anybody else has questions, make sure you send them here to us at news@washingtoninformer.com. Again, send your questions to news@washingtoninformer.com. We'll make sure that Prince George's editor, Will Ford, gets those questions. And the next time he has the opportunity to speak with the Lieutenant Governor, you'll get those questions answered, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
you.